So Nigel Farage and Reform UK have selected their candidate for Mayor of London in 2028 to face off against the internationally despised Sadiq Khan, the Muslim mayor who has ruined London. And instead of former SAS serviceman Ant Middleton, who spoke at Reform Conference in 2024 but was dropped because he voiced support for Tommy Robinson, they have chosen Laila Cunningham, someone that most people wouldn't have heard of outside of Britain, but she is a Muslim mother of seven. That's right, Reform UK would like a Muslim mayor of London to take over from the current Muslim mayor of London. This is Britain's leading right-wing populist party. I know lots of my American viewers will be appalled at this news, but I want to take you through who Laila Cunningham is, because lots of people have been alleging she is an Islamist, this sort of distinction between hypothetical moderate Muslims who just don't read their own texts too seriously, and politically minded radical jihadists. And I don't think that's the case. I think she is a practicing Muslim. I think she's just a political grifter who's more interested in self-promotion and doesn't really believe anything at all. And I think we demand a better form of both right-wing politician, but also that we should be able to represent ourselves in our own country, in our own political movements that are principally concerned about mass migration and demographic replacement. So who is Laila Cunningham? Well, when she defected to Reform UK back in June of 2025, she did the following interview with the London Evening Standard. She is a criminal lawyer, an entrepreneur, and a mother of seven, and she was welcomed by Nigel Farage into the party as it tries to expand its appeal to more voters in London and beyond. And very early on, they were telegraphing Laila's intent to be a prominent force in London politics. She said to The Standard, "I think you're going to see a massive surge in London in terms of councillors." She even claimed the next mayor of London could be Reform, which would be a seismic shift in the capital's politics. So, very similar to Zia Yusuf, who donated £200,000 to Reform UK after he was introduced to Nigel Farage by media mogul Sir Paul Marshall. You know, the same Paul Marshall who owns Unheard and The Spectator, who installed Michael Gove as editor, the former Liberal Democrat who owns Jordan Peterson's ARC conference, for example, used to be on the board of GB News, helped Rishi Sunak become leader of the Conservative Party, and also, of course, helped Kemi Badenoch become the leader of the Conservative Party. This very influential cabal of people who own pretty much every outlet and party on the right, well, they installed Zia Yusuf in the party. He immediately set about expelling Ben Habib and called the police on Rupert Lowe for fake threats to alleging to kill him. Well, as soon as he came on the scene, Nigel Farage was hinting that Zia Yusuf was next in line to the throne, that someone younger and better looking than him had come along, and that Nigel Farage was getting into his 60s, wouldn't be around forever, and eventually Reform would be handed off onto someone like Zia Yusuf. Similar vibes here, where Laila Cunningham has come on the scene, defected as a local councillor, and immediately is being floated as Reform UK's Mayor of London candidate, and now, officially, she is. As for her background, she was born in St Mary's Hospital, Paddington, and she told The Standard, "Again, I grew up here. I never felt that. I can say that as a woman, I can say that as a Muslim, we have certain communities in this country that have totally destroyed the image of British Muslims, and that makes me very, very angry, and I want to defend British values and British rights." Right, so her principal interest is in defending the reputation of Muslims in Britain. She says she wants to defend British values, much like Zia Yusuf, who gave his entire speech, his debut speech, at the Birmingham conference before the election for Reform, saying that he wants to defend British values, or a party of British values, and British rights, of course. So all of this is a protection of the legal fictions that say that anyone from anywhere can be as British as you and me, no matter their birthplace, their heritage, or their religion, and that Britain is just a nation of laws that stop us from treading on one another's toes. And actually, I think my identity and my culture amounts to more than that. But of course, me asserting that would then exclude Laila Cunningham from being considered as British as me. And so she has a motivation to her reasoning to say that that is not the case. Anyway, so this, again, Mayor of London candidate from Reform. Now, people were questioning, if she is a Muslim, to what extent is she devout? Is she just using her Islamic heritage as a cosmetic identity to try and win over Muslim voters in London? And someone has pointed out before, she's been asked about this on GB News, and she says she is practicing, but if you zoom into a screenshot, she does have a crescent moon tattooed on her arm. Now, depending on which hadith you read, tattoos may or may not be haram, but, I mean, this is an Islamic symbol. It may be a nod to her parents and her Egyptian heritage, but also, remember, the crescent moon is a symbol that is emblazoned on, I think it's about 20 Islamic countries' flags, including Pakistan and Turkey. So it's hard to get a read on just how committed to her faith she is. She does reiterate her commitment to her faith in this interview with The Telegraph that, yet again, doing a lot of puff pieces around the time that she defected. She says that she speaks fiercely in defence of free speech, admitting she's worried about the direction it's heading under Labour. She says Britain must be a symbol of freedom, as it was in the 1960s when her parents moved here from Egypt to escape communism. I remember at the time, the Egyptian resistance to communism was a very virulent strain of Islam, so I don't know if she's spoken about her family background, but I'd be interested to hear more as to why her mother and father fled Egypt and were being persecuted by the anti-Islamic communist government there. She also says, as a Muslim, she has no time for Angela Rayner's former plans to adopt an official definition of Islamophobia, warning it risks a slide into authoritarianism. If you want to criticise Islam, then it's up to you, she says. Everyone has their own opinions. People criticise Christianity, and she is married to an English Christian man as well. So she's in a mixed faith relationship. So perhaps she's not nearly as devout as people are concerned that she could be. However, when she was a Conservative councillor in London, she hosted the first Ramadan Iftar event in Westminster North, saying it was a wonderful gathering of the Muslim community. She got a lot of tweets about this, by the way. She also had another Twitter account for North London Conservatives and was reposting lots of her other tweets, but here she is, putting on a wonderful spread for an Iftar dinner back in 2023 for the Conservative Middle East North Africa group, because we're against identity politics, of course, except for the groups that we're trying to win over. But we're against white identity politics, because of course that would be racist. Anyway, so she was tweeting, Ramadan Mubarak to all, wish you all a happy, safe and blessed Ramadan, and she was celebrating the fact that the Met Police were going to provide officers around Regent's Park Mosque to support our Muslim community. Okay, so clearly considers herself to be a member of said Muslim community. Here she is happy that a Muslim Lord Mayor and his consorts have been elected, wearing hijabs. Actually, it turns out she's considering herself to be a member of a lot of communities, because in 2017, she shared the following poem from her previous Twitter account, Dupoy Laila, because Dupoy, I believe, is her maiden name. She wrote, "London, my love, tears stream from my eyes, from the terror and its lies." I assume this was after the London Bridge attack. "I am London. I am an immigrant. I am she. I am he. I am you. I am us. I am Brixton. I am Jamaican. I am Kilburn. I am Irish. I am Southall. I am Indian. I am Whitechapel. I am Bangladesh. I am Ealing. I am Polish. I am Peckham. I am Nigerian. I am New Maiden. I am Korean. I am Clerkenwell. I am Italian. I am Stockwell. I am Portuguese. I am Hackney. I am Vietnamese. I am Palmer's Green. I am Greek. I am free. I am gay." That's going to get clipped. "I am Muslim. I am Christian, I am Buddhist, I am atheist, I am love, I am strength, I am acceptance, I am resistance, I am diverse, I am London." Notice how the words British and English didn't feature in there. Now that could have come from the mouth of Sadiq Khan yesterday. Again, this was a number of years ago, but that's a pretty quick turnaround of 8 years to go from avowedly saying diversity is our strength to joining the right-wing populist party, principally concerned about immigration, and running to be London mayor. I don't know, that seems pretty suspicious to me, actually. And then she went to Pride as well in 2022. All the trans flags around, with a caption, "So special to see London at its best. So much love for Pride from the crowd." So, 3 and a bit years ago, Pride, all the rage. Bear in mind, this was, again, at the peak of woke, the height of the trans madness, when plenty of people, me included, were speaking out about this, but no, she was in favour of it. Again, joining Reform UK, wants to be London mayor, and this is what she was doing a couple of years ago. She even posted that she marched for equal rights for all over the world, on behalf of Westminster City Council. As the caption from World by Wolf said here, if Reform are going to get the Muslims, can they at least get the based ones, please? And it seems that Laila's just keen to be seen with everyone at every event, actually, because here she is, being photographed with our good old friend, Mr. Michael Gove. And actually, she's been taking photographs and sat down with plenty of the top brass of the Conservative Party. Administrator of the Boris Wave here, former Home Secretary Dame Priti Patel. Here she is with Kwasi Kwarteng, for example, and Rishi Sunak. and Matt Hancock. It seems that there's nobody that she didn't want to be seen with in the previous Conservative Party. On her Lancaster Gate Conservatives account, she was glossing Rishi Sunak, saying he's a PM that delivers. He has sealed the AUKUS deal, got Brexit done, and is stopping dangerous channel crossings, and a clever budget that deals with the issues at hand. Now, this was in March of 2023. This was after Rishi Sunak cooed his way into office, despite not being voted by the membership. He was definitely not getting control of the small boats, and still brought legal migration to record levels. We had net migration of almost 1 million, and total migration, of course, to well over 1 million on Rishi Sunak's watch. This happens to be the same man who celebrated Diwali in Downing Street and previously wrote a paper in 2014 saying the Conservative Party should import more Indians because they're the demographic that votes Conservative the most, and obviously they're eligible to vote in British elections thanks to the 1948 and 1981 British Nationality Acts repeal. So, just very conspicuous here that Laila Cunningham thinks that Rishi Sunak was just the bee's knees during the height of his unpopularity, and has 180'd on that, and now joined Reform UK. And she was very keen, yet again, to keep getting photos with Rishi Sunak and the top brass of the Conservative Party at any event she gets. In fact, she was so keen on Rishi Sunak that she was almost the Conservatives' candidate for Rotherham at the last election. She just pulled out right before the deadline, presumably because she realised that it would close doors for her future political career if she hitched her wagon to the sinking ship of the Conservatives. But she was going to be parachuted into Rotherham, you know, this lifelong Londoner who cares so much about London that she needs to become London mayor. She was going to be parachuted into Rotherham, which the Conservatives only lost under Boris Johnson in the 2019 election by 3,100 votes. So why would the Conservatives field an Egyptian Muslim woman who was born and lived all her life in London as the candidate for Rotherham, unless they were trying to play on the Muslim vote in the area and try and bag themselves a marginal seat when they were expecting nationwide losses, the worst in 100 years? Was Laila Cunningham really willing to play Muslim identity politics in the constituency, probably most infamous across the country, for the Pakistani grooming gangs? Is she really the person, then, to take on that issue in London, where we know the Pakistani grooming gangs have been operating, and Sadiq Khan has denied it, but even leaks from the Met Police have come out and said, yeah, we've been dealing with this issue for quite some time, and nothing gets done. We know grooming gangs are operating in the capital city, because, of course, it's the most diverse area in the country, and with diversity follows that kind of crime. Why was Laila Cunningham willing to become the Rotherham candidate until she probably made the calculation that either she wouldn't win or the Conservatives would be eclipsed by Reform in the next couple of years, and she favoured her chances there instead? As I said on X, people are trying to make sense of why Laila is the candidate for London Mayor, despite her contradictory positions throughout her political career. And it's actually not that she is a Muslim entryist trying to turn Reform UK into the secret Muslim party. It's that she will say whatever she needs to get ahead in politics. She is only interested in self-promotion. She will board any insurgent political vehicle, whether it's the Conservatives in government or Reform as the presumptive party of government, just to advance her own career, to be seen with the right people, to say the right things that are kind of like passwords to get ahead in politics. If you rote, learn and recite the liberal platitudes of British values, then that's good enough to get ahead in Reform, because they're desperate for minority candidates to prove to a hostile media that they aren't actually racist. And so the bar for entry for someone like Laila Cunningham is very low, and so she defected, she became slick and learned all of the sort of talking points that play well with the boomer donors and Nigel Farage himself, and so was just plastered across GB News and the BBC as their female Muslim patriotic attack dog. And now she's landed herself the Mayor of London gig, despite us not knowing actually what she believes on anything, really. I mean, she never needs to confront the contradiction between supporting Pride and being a Muslim, apparently, because she never needed to reconcile that contradiction to get ahead in politics. It's just that we're told you need to play the game, you need to be liberal, be polite, you need to not rock the boat too much, You need to not get called mean names by the media, and then you land yourself a safe seat. And what happens by abiding by this playbook is Reform ostracize every eligible candidate that is either competent or substantively represents their base, and you end up with people who are, and I don't say this lightly, but total grifters like Laila Cunningham, who doesn't really stand for anything at all. And so you get cope from the Reform base. And I don't want to insult people that believe that Reform are the necessary battering ram to split apart the uniparty of Labour and Conservatives, because there are good arguments for that political strategy, and good people make those arguments. So I'm not trying to insult anyone, least of all Colin Brazier here, who is a very good man. He's a committed Catholic. We have mutuals that speak up for him, and I know he's a dedicated father, so I don't wish to disparage him. But when he said, I spent a few hours at Reform HQ with Laila recently. She's whip-smart, articulate and nuanced. Her views were thought through, coherent and firmly of the right. I don't think that's the case, as we've seen. I failed to see why having Muslim parents puts her beyond the pale for some parts of the Conservative movement. Well, one, Colin, it's because she herself is a Muslim. It's not just her parentage. Number two, it's whether or not she is a Muslim. Her previous positions have not been of the right, and she's held every position under the sun, so I don't think we can actually trust her. But three, let's say you're correct. Let's say she believes all the things she says about prescribing the Muslim Brotherhood and prosecuting the Pakistani grooming gangs. Fair enough, I agree with all those things. Even if she practices Islam peacefully, one, it does not represent my faith, my tradition, my culture, my heritage, and even if she practices her faith peacefully, it's not going to recreate my civilization. And so, why would I want her elected to represent me if I don't feel represented? And it's perfectly legitimate to say, this woman does not share my comprehensive metaphysical doctrine of good and evil, God, right and wrong. Whether or not we should have a caliphate, that's a pretty significant question we should probably ask, because if she doesn't believe that, then she doesn't believe in the inerrancy of the Quran as written on a stone tablet in heaven, which the Prophet Muhammad laid out. And so, to what extent is she actually a Muslim? All of these contradictions have gone unaddressed, and to just say that parts of the right are being unduly prejudicial because she seems to mouth the right platitudes is just insufficient, I'm afraid. You're not going to get past the point that British patriots feel they should be represented by one of their own. London should be governed by an Englishman, not an Egyptian Muslim. And that's completely fair to say. And then we had the most ridiculous argument in response to me saying I refuse to vote for a Muslim candidate. Adrian Hilton said, "What an extraordinary take. What would Connor say to the person who posted, 'I refuse to vote for the Roman Catholic candidate'?" Well, I presume they're probably more likely to be a Muslim than anything else. But this isn't an argument about different denominations of Christianity, Adrian. We're not debating transubstantiation or the legitimacy of relics. We're debating whether or not Christ was incarnated, whether or not all human beings are made in the image of God, and whether or not there are any scriptural justifications for, say, killing unbelievers, committing acts of terror, marrying your cousin, marrying children, and establishing a caliphate. Because that's what Islam believes. And then he says, Laila Cunningham is the embodiment of British Islam, an Islam infused with Britishness, which might be considered a kind of Anglican Islam, and not proper Islam by the more devout. She manifests precisely the sort of moderate faith which needs to become mainstream among Muslims. Without it, we end in sectarian strife and civil unrest. No, those aren't the only options. The only options aren't a liberal government-approved version of Islam that you wish to kind of manifest into being because you feel uncomfortable about the implications if it doesn't exist. Islam is completely optional and doesn't belong in our country, and we can just remove it. And I'm willing to do that. The majority of the British public at this point are willing to do that because they believe vast numbers of legal migrants need to go home as well. And 53% of the British public, when polled by YouGov, didn't like Islam. And if you break it down by party, it's overwhelmingly the Reform base that dislike Islam. So why are Reform pushing Muslim candidates? Very conspicuous. There is the realpolitik argument that they need to do this in order to win London. But bear in mind, only 40% of voters turned out for the last London mayoral election, and I think there's going to be a lot of disaffected native Londoners. I live in London, I live on the outskirts, I was born and raised here. I didn't try and take a safe seat in the north, unlike Laila Cunningham, so I think I can have a claim to being a Londoner. And I know me and my family won't vote at all now. Unless there is a patriotic English candidate put up by someone else. And if there is, then I'll vote for that person. But I know that there are going to be lots of people that are concerned about the kinds of issues that reform purports to represent who don't want to vote for Laila Cunningham because she doesn't represent them. She's not trustworthy. She's not one of us. She's not on our team. She's not taken our side. She doesn't share my faith. She doesn't share my politics. We'll get onto that in a moment because of her reaction to this, and it was very telling. But also the idea that there is such a thing as an Islam infused with Britishness. You can say that, it doesn't make it true. In fact, what we know by polling by the Henry Jackson Society is that second-generation British-born university-educated Muslims are much more radical than their immigrant parents. 75% believe that Hamas did nothing wrong on October 7th, 52% want to ban depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, a third want Sharia law to be the official law of the land, and Islam to be the official religion of the state. So British Islam, insofar as it exists, is actually way more radical and is better represented by the atrocities of the Pakistani grooming gangs and those that justify it than sort of hoping that Muslims just don't read their own texts too closely. Because this is what you're saying here. We should gamble our entire civilization on the hope that people like Laila Cunningham don't take the Quran and Hadiths too seriously. And I'm sorry, that's a completely optional risk that I decide not to take. Thank you very much. Also, I wouldn't go around comparing anything to Anglicanism if you wanted it to be seen favourably, because look at the state of Christianity in Britain thanks to the Anglican Church, and look at the last three Archbishops of Canterbury. I mean, you had Rowan Williams, who was a literal communist and member of Searchlight, then you had Justin Welby, who spent more time celebrating Ramadan and Eid than he did Easter and Christmas, and then had to step down because of his involvement in covering up certain sex abuse scandals in the church, and now you've got the current woman who is a woman, and also said in 2018 that her role in the church is to be subversive. So, I don't think Anglicanism and comparisons to it are compliments. But whether or not Laila Cunningham is authentically right-wing or trustworthy, well, it was revealed in her reaction to this entire discourse, the fact that myself and Dan Wootton and Lawrence Fox, etc., had said vocally, we don't trust her, we don't support Islam, we won't vote for a Muslim candidate. She went on Harry Cole's show. I've spoken to Harry before, he thinks I'm a sort of firebrand radical, I am sure, but he said, what does Laila Cunningham think of the criticism that she's received? And she decided to say everyone is far right and that she wants to be a mayor for Hindus, Muslims, Catholics, trans people. So she wants to be diverse and inclusive.
You are a Muslim. On the right, there's been a bit of a brouhaha since you've been announced as a candidate today. I'm not talking about within Reform, but the people on the even further to the right in British politics. Lawrence Fox, for example, is whittering on about your candidacy, saying it's selling out. Dan Wootton has suggested that you're somehow some sort of possibly, quote, possibly an Islamist, and Reform have capitulated. That's the word. So what's your response to that?
Number one, they're not the right, they're the far right, right? And I don't even think that they're far right. They're just, you know, the thing is, I don't see myself as a British Muslim, a British Egyptian. I see myself as a British person. That's it. And whether you're Muslim, Hindu, Catholic, gay, trans, you know, we need a mayor that is there for everyone equally, not some select groups.
What do you think they're trying to do there by sort of stirring this up? Well, you know, the suggestion that you're possibly an Islamist. I mean, how does that make you feel? What is your response to that direct, ridiculous charge?
It's so ridiculous, I just ignore it. Honestly, it's some Twitter tunnel vision that they have. I'm the strongest person to call out radical Islam. I'm the strongest person to say that if Muslims move here, they have to embrace British values.
No, actually, I don't think you're the strongest person to call out Islam, because I think that you have one foot in the enemy camp, and actually I don't think that I need to launder any of my ideas through someone of a different ethnicity or a different faith just to make them legitimate. I think I'm more than capable of criticising Islam on its own terms, that is, a tribal foreign religion that will not reproduce my great Anglo-Christian civilization, even if practiced peacefully, and very frequently isn't practiced peacefully and ends up in terror attacks and grooming gangs and all sorts of other bits of violent crime like FGM and forced marriage. So I don't think that's a good thing, actually, Laila. I also don't think that British values exist because they're just what British people believe and do over time, and so you cannot divorce British culture or British values from British people. And if you aren't interested in protecting British people, then you're not interested in conserving anything about Britain whatsoever. And there is no such value set that applies to Catholics and Muslims and Hindus and trans people all at the same time, because they have completely different metaphysical doctrines of the good, not least of all that those three religions don't support the self-identity of men becoming women. And the fact that she included trans people as a constituency of her concern shows that she still seems to have some sympathies with those she went on the Pride March with before. We thought this was a settled issue, even by the Supreme Court, that says that men can't become women, but apparently Laila Cunningham still believes that you can change your biological sex just by kind of like wishing. How this represents authentic right-wing thought is inexplicable to me. But the most telling part is that she used the word far-right to criticise anyone who doesn't want a Muslim to become Mayor of London. If you use the word far-right as an insult, you are an enemy, because you're using the language of the enemy. And what you're saying is, I am the only legitimate position on the right, me and no further. You're not willing to engage in a good faith conversation with other people, you're just willing to call them names, what is meant to be a synonym for fascist and racist and Nazi, to try and ostracise them from the debate. So the position of the Reform UK London mayoral candidate is, if you don't want a Muslim mayor of London, you're a far-right racist. And what was even more telling is the next question that Harry Cole threw at her, whether or not she's willing to denounce ethno-nationalists. It's not a label that I use, but it is being used to ban any opinion except saying anyone from anywhere can self-identify as being as British as the native population the moment their souls hit our soil, or whether or not they hold said British values if they are just born in Britain and there are therefore no consequences to not abiding by those British values. So you can just become British and it can never be revoked, even though it is apparently a matter of values. And if you raise these contradictions, well, you're a racist.
Do you think that the debate about immigration in this country is going down a sort of path where it's becoming sort of ethno versus civic nationalists, and actually there's a sort of race? Always you have it in America, though. If you didn't come over on the Mayflower, are you really, as an American, as someone who's been here for a couple of generations? What's your sort of take on the state of the debate about what, it really truly means to be British and the direction the row about immigration is going?
So I think on X, it's very toxic, right?
Yeah.
I've been called a Muslim CUNT, if I can say that on
You
YouTube,
can.
all the time, or an Islamic, various things. On other social medias, it's so positive. I think X is a dangerous place for that. On the streets, I don't feel that. Not at all.
What's the response been like from, rank and file reform members?
Amazing. Rank and file reform members embrace everyone. They require one thing. That you love this country.
Well, that's not strictly true, because Reform voters, when polled by YouGov, 71% of them say having British ancestry is a prerequisite for someone to be truly British, and 59% recognise that the nation is an ethnic, not a civic community. A third of Reform UK voters say that they'd be prouder if Britain had fewer people from minority ethnic backgrounds in the next 10 years. So it doesn't seem that Laila Cunningham's position actually does represent Reform's own voters. And I know for a fact there are plenty of Reform supporters who watch my stuff who, even, again, if they support the party to break up the two-party Labour Conservative cartel, would rather that a much more competent native Christian politician were running as London Mayor instead. But what's important is the fact that Reform are now using ethno-nationalist as a slur. Because Zia Youssef today said Rachel Reeves comes out as an ethno-nationalist because she believes only white people can be British. That's true. British people, British natives, are white. We currently have a legal fiction which says that anyone from anywhere can become British, but that's not true in any substantive case. You might have a British passport. Sorry, it doesn't make you British. You can be one of our friends or our family members or our countrymen because, Laila Cunningham has married a Christian English man, but she's not British. She's an Egyptian Muslim. Zia Youssef is a Sri Lankan Muslim. Neither of them substantively represent the concerns of Reform's base and yet are being astroturfed into their very prominent places as the heir apparent of London Mayor or even the role of Prime Minister in the party that's most likely to win the next government. And it's because Reform are desperate to do anything except be called racist. And they're called racist by the implication of the term ethno-nationalist. So Zia Youssef here is using ethno-nationalist not because he thinks he's going to get Rachel Reeves fired from the Labour government. He's using it to signal to his own base that anything except civic nationalism that says that Zia Yusuf is as indistinguishably British as I am, is evil, is not allowed in Reform UK, and is to be cast out into the darkness, which explains why I'm banned from the party, even though I don't use the term ethno-nationalist. It's because I'm not willing to engage in this fiction that says the likes of Laila Cunningham and Zia Yusuf are substantively or actually British. And so what Zia Yusuf and Laila Cunningham are doing by using the terms ethno-nationalist and far-right is saying that as long as we are in the party, you can't be called racist, with the implication being, if they were not in the party, if they were not given the London mayoral seat, or made formerly chairman, now the runner-up to Nigel Farage as the next likely Prime Minister, then the party would credibly be called racist. It's almost like terms like racist, ethno-nationalist, and Islamophobic are being used to advantage the individual careers of ambitious immigrant politicians. Zia Yusuf doesn't actually think that Keir Starmer is going to sack Rachel Reeves over this. He just wants to use this as an excuse to push anyone to his right out of reform. But this shows that they think their true enemy is ethno-nationalists. And again, this just means anyone who recognises that the British people are native to their own country and deserve political representation as a constituency unto themselves. So that means there is a place to the right of reform for an authentic right-wing party that expresses nativist concerns without being unduly impolite or thuggish, who actually stand for the things that reform purport to stand for, but it turns out that their candidates, well, they don't stand for anything except promoting and enriching themselves. So someone could field an authentic, native, patriotic candidate for London Mayor. Or, if all else fails, they should have just done what Pete North suggested, and reform, if they thought it was unwinnable without pandering to the Muslim vote in London because the demographics are unfavourable, just promised to not contest the position and then liquidate it when they were going to win the next government. The fact that they didn't do that, and instead are at best willing to use a career grifter to play identity politics to hope to win the minority vote when, given the prejudices of London's Muslims, they're probably not going to vote for a woman even if she is a Muslim, or, at worst, are making another Muslim mayor of London and, in Zia Yusuf, Britain's first Muslim Prime Minister. The fact that they've done that means that they're not an authentic right-wing populist party. And so, for all the people saying, well, we just need to vote reform, actually, no, we don't. We have a few years till both the London mayoral and the general election. We can demand better. We can demand more. There are absolutely going to be more qualified candidates that represent our constituency than Laila Cunningham. So we just don't reward this political exercise in greasy pole climbing. We can just say no thanks, we're not going to vote for a Muslim candidate, and you are not going to get our support if you keep fielding one.